In my video for Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, I briefly spoke about found footage films and mockumentaries. I talked a little bit about how it became sort of an oversaturated genre, and it's something we began to see a lot of in the later 2000s. Which is funny because it's something that used to be quite sparse. At first we saw a little bit of it in the late 70s and early 80s with Cannibal Holocaust. Then we saw a little bit of it in the late 90s and early 2000s with the Blair Witch Project. And then into the coming 2000s, we began to see, well, a lot of it. It's almost become a parody of itself at this point with the Paranormal Activity films. The reason why I think found footage and mockumentary type films are so easy to oversaturate is because you have to keep finding a reason to make it work while making it found footagey and, on different cameras, whether it's like a documentary or security camera footage. So how do you make that work? How do you take a story structure but make it seem like this is something that's really happening? Because the most effective found footage or mockumentary film is the one that makes you forget that it's a movie. It makes you kind of think that this might be something that could really happen in real life, which is why Cannibal Holocaust is so effective, which is why the Blair Witch Project, when it came out, was so effective, because movies like this weren't coming out in record numbers like they are today.
My name is Gerald Geraldson. Hi, this is my eHarmony video bio.
Vancouver-based stand-up comedian Gerald Varga has been playing the character of Gerald Geraldson for quite a few years now. He was in the stand-up scene for a while, and he's been doing this horror-inspired character by the name of Gerald Geraldson, who was conceived within the walls of a hollowed-out cow to become the ultimate cow-killing machine. This is a character that you very much appreciate if you're into the likes of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or even like the Devil's Rejects. The character always reminded me of a mix of, say, the cook from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Bill Moseley's character from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and his character from Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects. And he's very much a 70s and 80s inspired horror creation that goes up and tells jokes as if he's a real active serial killer.
Young honey answers the door. I said, "Excuse me, was that you making all that noise up here?" She says, "Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. I'll stop." And I was like, "Oh no, that's fine. I just want to know what you look like."
After quite a few years of prep, Gerald finally put together this film, Murder Box, which is meant to be half slasher, half sort of, not quite mockumentary, but more found footagey, which you'll see the examples in the film itself that I'm going to talk about. And also just in a way, I guess, to promote the character. If you haven't heard of him through the stand-up routines, you're likely going to hear about him this way. And what I'm hoping, and what I'm sure he's hoping, is that it will inspire you to go check out some of the stand-up routines and see what this Gerald character is all about. And if you're already into the stand-up routines, if you've already heard of it, if you've already seen the stand-up and find it funny, you're going to love this movie right away. The film is pretty much an origin of Gerald Geraldson, obviously with some creative liberties taken, or Gerald himself might be in jail at this point. In the film, his real name isn't Gerald, it's just the stage name of Gerald Geraldson that the character is associated with. The character has things broken off with his girlfriend, she ghosts him, and then creates something called STALKER blog, in where she begins to completely roast him and talk about what a horrible person he is and how he's texting her and how he won't stop trying to contact her, which is stemmed from a few videos that he had recorded trying to get in contact with her that she found creepy, so she created the vlog. And they are very, very creepy videos. Gerald's performances in these are great. He really does come off as this like unhinged. You can slowly see the madness start to rise inside of him as he's sending video after video to his ex, and they get kind of creepier and creepier as it goes along. And eventually gets to a point where Sam Geraldson, which is the real name of Gerald Geraldson in the film, his non-stage name, begins something called Psychoblog, which is his response to the STALKER blog, which is the Gerald Geraldson character becoming more of the real person. And just watching that metamorphosis take place is actually really, really good. The performances in this movie, even though it is a very micro-budgeted film, you know, in my opinion, that never matters as long as the performances are great and there's heart in it, which this movie has double doses plenty of. Now, obviously, we've got to talk about how they make this work as far as a found footage film goes. Well, the character of Sam Geraldson is said to be very paranoid. He has surveillance cameras installed in his home. There are scenes when he's being questioned by the police after people start going missing, including his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend. So we see footage of him being interviewed by the police. There's also an active serial killer within the film who, not going to spoil anything, it might be Gerald, it might not be, but it is called the Headcam Killer. So we see footage from that character's perspective. This is where we get to see a little bit more of the body count get popped up, and obviously to see something happening, like people getting killed. So you have these Headcam Killer segments, which are actually really, really creepy. Like, it's very pseudo snuff kind of stuff, and it's actually pretty disturbing to watch. Very, very effective as far as the tone of the film goes. I really like how everything blends together with the surveillance footage, the interview footage at the police precinct, and the Headcam Killer stuff. It all comes together in a very, very unique way that definitely adds some spice to this whole found footage mockumentary kind of subgenre. It does it very differently. It does it very... It's unique. It's done in a very unique way, not in a lot of ways that I can think of as far as movies like this goes, especially in something that's as oversaturated to begin with as the horror genre, where we've seen everything just millions and millions of times. So it's really great to see this fresh perspective on the genre, but not only that, just as a film itself, on its own merits, it's very interesting to watch and very, very entertaining. Gerald's main inspiration for the film as a whole was true crime, which is very evident when you watch the film. There certainly is a real-life serial killer interview/documentary vibe to it. He was also inspired by those weird clown sightings from a little while back, as there is mention of it in the film, which certainly does help the film feel even more grounded to reality and feel like it could be really happening, which is absolutely what you want in a movie like this. And here's just some trivia on the film from Gerald Varga himself. Took a long time to make it. In the original movie, there was no detective doing the narration. I plan on making more features. This was my film school, so I'm just happy it's watchable and not something that embarrassed me for a first-time effort. My goal was to just make an interesting film that held people's attention and kept them entertained. More from Gerald. It made me think about how famous my act would be if I actually went out and did evil shit and got caught. Not that I ever would do bad things, but I think that's the character's major motivation. I mean, imagine if I really was a psycho. Everyone would look that shit up on YouTube. Which he's absolutely right about, especially nowadays. Some of the biggest sellers, especially on Netflix at the moment, is serial killer stuff. We just got a documentary on Ted Bundy, and we're getting that Zac Efron biopic about him, not to mention the new Tarantino flick in the works that is set to be heavily centered on Sharon Tate and Charles Manson. Other elements of it working very well both practically and thematically as a mockumentary found footage kind of flick is a running narration from the character Detective Alan Chernick. I love this element of the film because it makes all the surveillance footage, headcam killer, and video log footage all feel like evidence. And now there's this big cold case files serial killer documentary on it. I was very excited to see this film finally come into fruition, as I had been following its development for a few years, much like with Camp Death 3 The Final Summer, which you can check out that video if you haven't seen it. That one, I had a little more of a hand in that one as far as the backstage production kind of stuff. Did some poster art for that one, obviously. This one I was more of a bystander with. Regardless, I was very excited to see it all come together, because it's clearly, if you watch it, it's very, very much a passion project. This is something that Gerald really very much gave a shit about getting made, and I hope a lot of people see it. I hope this video inspires you to go see it, because we don't have a lot of originality in the horror genre, at least as far as what we're seeing in the mainstream. We're not seeing a lot of stuff come out that's like truly somebody's passion project. It's always just some boogeyman or some doll or some ghost thing. It's very much Blumhouse oriented. So I feel like horror, just as a genre in itself, is really kicking ass in the indies. And this is one of the ones that I think deserve to stand out and I think deserve to be seen by a lot more people.